Hi, Douglas.
Hiya.
How you doing?
All right. How you doing?
Can't complain. Let me introduce us. I'm Robert Wright. This is the Wright Show, available in both streaming video and via audio podcast. You are Douglas Rushkoff, very well-known writer, kind of media critic, technology critic, member of the counterculture, and author of a number of books, most recently Team Human, which is what we're going to talk about today. Now, it is safe to say that you are not entirely happy with the way the digital revolution is unfolding. And in fact, Team Human is something of a call to action on that front. But you at one point were among the, kind of techno enthusiasts, right? You were hanging out with John Perry Barlow singing the praises of the glorious future. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. I don't see it as a but. I see it from the beginning. I was really excited about the possibilities of technology, or for technology to promote a really weird and wonderful human future.
Well, it is weird. It is weird,
but not. It's less wonderful, though. I mean, and I remember and it was the relatively early days. It was still around 1992, 93 when Wired magazine came up, and people started to talk about the emerging internet for its ability to save the NASDAQ stock exchange rather than promote some human interest. How are we going to make money off this thing? Became the big question. And in my first book on digital technology, this book Siberia that got canceled in 1993 because the publisher CYBERIA. Yeah. And the publisher thought the net would be over by 1993 when the book was supposed to come out, so they canceled the first edition. In there, I was arguing at the end, I said, look, we have a window of opportunity here to really claim this technology for human culture, because there are a lot of other forces that are hoping to claim it for other agendas. So even in those early days, what I was trying to do was to get real people and communities excited enough about the pro-social possibilities of these technologies that we didn't surrender them to the dot-com boom. But I guess I kind of lost that fight.
Okay. Now, before we talk about where you think things went wrong and what we can do about it, let's revisit those olden days. I mean, I remember when Wired came out, and my recollection is I mean, there was certainly a capitalist vibe to Wired, but I guess I want to be clear on like whether you're saying that Wired, the publisher, saw this as a way to make money, or they were really preaching that. As I recall, the preaching, there was definitely a lot of pro-human stuff. If you take there was a transhumanist vibe, like there was the smart drugs and we can improve our performance and stuff, but there was also well, I'll stop there. I mean, there was a libertarian vibe to Wired and in Silicon Valley generally, and to people like John Perry Barlow, right? A lot of the optimists were libertarians. Were you not on board with that at that point?
Right. I was not on board with that at that point. I was actually banned from Wired, from the pages of Wired.
But weren't you there for a while? I almost remember your name, and you were never there?
Nope.
Okay.
People tried to review my books there. They tried to review Siberia, Media Virus, and Playing the Future, my first 3 real books about this. And I remember someone from Wired, who I'm going to meet up in Portland, she emailed me a copy of the memo from Louis Rossetto, who was the producer, the publisher at the time, saying, "We don't do Rushkoff." I should take it as a compliment now. I made it through anyway.
I hope that's framed and on your wall somewhere.
No, I really should. I'll find it. It's got to be in my old well account. But I understand, because I was sort of part of the Mondo 2000 psychedelic.
Oh, yeah. Now that brings back the memories.
And that was different than their agenda. And Lewis was, a pretty strident libertarian, and libertarians got their thing too. But the weird thing was how well libertarianism dovetails with digital technology. They're almost the perfect twins in a certain way. But what digital technology does is it takes markets and just spins them out of control between, power law dynamics that favor the one greatest hit of any system and leave everybody else in that long tail of 1 or 0 sales. It's hard when things are spinning quite that fast. But, I do remember John Perry Barlow, who was a Grateful Dead lyricist. On the one hand, he had a foot in that sort of psychedelic camp, and on the other, he was also a libertarian.
He was like a rancher in Montana or somewhere, right?
Yep, where he used to kind of take care of John Kennedy after his dad died, and he was a father figure to many of us. And he wrote something for Wired called The Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace.
Right.
And in it, he said, basically, governments of the world, beware. We don't need you. We're our own place. Go away. And I was a kid, and at the time, I thought, screw government. They're arresting all the little hackers. They were doing something called Operation Sun Devil, where they were breaking into teenagers, houses and taking them away in handcuffs for changing the thermostat in a shopping mall. And they had the Computer Decency Act, which was, again, the government kind of shutting down free expression on the internet. So we all felt, go away. What I didn't realize is if you get rid of government, you just create a free zone for business, and business came in into this newly deregulated space and really took it over and turned it from this sort of weird experiment in human social interaction into just a virtual strip mall.
Yeah. Now, the expectations in that declaration that he wrote for Wired, as I recall, one of them was censorship is doomed. Good luck trying to control information governments. And there was a certain kind of farewell to the nation state kind of thing, wasn't there? Or
yeah.
So and what else was he envisioning? Do you recall that kind of?
Well, that we were going to create our own new kind of wiki governance or something, that collectively the people on the net, would in a certain way, he believed in human nature and that the space would be defined by human nature. What he didn't take into account was that corporations would embed their values into the very platforms that we use. It's hard to express human nature if you're using a Facebook platform that's intentionally designed to promote addiction or to make people see their friends and associates as adversaries, or that's intentionally pushing people into their own little tunnel vision, extreme versions of themselves.
Of course, what Facebook would say is addiction is just another term for giving people what they want. And John Perry Barlow's expectation was that if you gave people what they want, it would all work out wonderfully. I mean, I don't know what he thinks.
But Facebook, the reason why Facebook can't say that is because if they're taking the algorithms from Las Vegas slot machines and using those in our news feeds, then that's not just what people want.
Well, it's a
notch
definition. I mean, nobody's chaining those people to the slot machines, but I
they're using
your point that it's not good for them in the long run. It doesn't bring out the best in them. It's like a heroin addict. They may want it at the moment, but still, it's not the world it's not the form of wish fulfillment we would like to see.
Right. It's more taking advantage of malnourished people. And people do have the right to buy 90-ounce, Slurpees and Coke and, but who really wants to be working for, a company that's promoting diabetes? It's at a certain point, it's it's not the way you want to be earning money.
Yeah. So how, leaving John Perry Barlow aside, tell us a little more about how you had hoped the world would look right now, back when you were more optimistic about the way things would unfold.
Well, I'm still optimistic about how things can unfold.
Okay, well, what will the world be like if your optimism is realized?
First, we will make it through the end of the 21st century without, losing 30-40% of the planet's population.
I'm for that.
I think we can still do it. I think we can organize in ways that we couldn't before. I think we can reduce our level of shame, which is holding us back in certain ways from achieving the kinds of human rights and social justice that people deserve.
And how does shame do that exactly?
Well, in a few ways. I mean, first, shame is shame is used. I mean, from the old days, shame was used to control people's sexuality and all. But now I feel like it's used more to keep people from forging solidarity as labor. If you don't talk about how much you earn or how little you earn, and they're just these sort of taboo subjects that are usually the ones that tend to be used to control us. I thought that the internet was going to engender more potential intimacy between people, that we would share things, and instead we got weird sharing, oversharing, and you look at I guess the internet that I was on in the late 80s and early 90s was an internet that you actually went online. It was this conscious choice, you would dial up.
I remember
and
the sound of the modem connecting.
Yep. And it cost money to go online, you weren't just on all the time. So, you would download a conversation, and then it was very asynchronous. You would spend hours crafting a paragraph of how you were going to participate in this debate about maybe libertarianism or how technology should be used with these other people. And the internet became this place where we sounded smarter than we do in real life. Mm-hmm. And we were almost embarrassed to meet each other because, oh no, he's going to see that I'm just me.
Of course, it was kind of an elite arena, right? I mean, at that point, a small subset of humankind was on it. It was largely computer geeks. I mean, I remember when I actually first went on, I was doing an article for the New Republic about the internet, which people had this was right before that famous New Yorker cartoon came out on the internet, Nobody Knows You're a Dog. It was just becoming like a thing, and the internet. And I went on. Remember the email program Pine that you would use on the Usenet groups? And it's like, and all the people in the Usenet groups knew all this stuff about the internet. I didn't. Like, they were all pros, and I was like a newbie. So it wasn't, I mean, maybe that era was destined to vanish as the internet was populated on a broader scale, but maybe not.
Well, the question, I guess, was whether or not people would have been able to use the internet in its early form. I think they would have. I wasn't a tech person either. And I figured out the command line and go to something, or FTP : something. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that much. But back when you went on using Telnet to get to a Pine and play with those things, to use a computer and to program a computer were almost the same thing. And then under the guise of making computing easier for people, they pushed it further back. They created these very thick interfaces, so users are very far from the innards of the machine now. And it felt to me a little bit intentional, a little bit, you guys are too stupid to really use this. When we installed a program in Windows, you summoned the wizard. Why did they pick the wizard as the metaphor? Except to try to say this stuff is mysterious and magical, and you will never understand it.
We're the ones who give you access to it and deserve your eternal gratitude. So we should tell for our younger viewers and listeners, of whom there are many, sadly, that we're talking about before the browser. In fact, when I wrote that piece for the New Republic, I mean, I heard the term World Wide Web, and I remember somebody wearing a T-shirt, seeing a T-shirt said, "The World Wide Web, you can get there from here." In other words, they were saying you really can get there. But the browser had not come to my attention.
Right.
The Netscape, I don't know when they did their IPO, but I know for you, I gather when Netscape went public and did their IPO, this was like a big moment for you when you started to worry or something, or maybe in retrospect, you see it as an unfortunate threshold.
No, it was that day. It was actually that day, because the day that Netscape went public, I know this really is a giveaway, was also the day that Jerry Garcia, the guitarist from the Grateful Dead, died.
There you go. Everything summed up in one coincidence.
It seemed to be. And it was like, okay, so the 60s values that many of us thought were going to be retrieved by the internet, this sort of hippie communal together network. You can understand when you're thinking everybody's going to get networked up, it sort of seemed like we were going to all join this virtual commune. And then if we could model these pro-social behaviors online, then we could translate them out into the real world and begin to actually engage with each other as beautifully as we do online. Now we're in a place where we're just like, at least we don't do that trolling and awful behavior in real life yet, although we kind of do. So it was that I started to think, oh, and that was, I guess, my mistake was I thought that these technologies were a bit more intrinsically liberating than they are. I thought that the real enemy was kind of television and one-way programming and Rupert Murdoch and social control. And then once people had the net, they would, of course, naturally start to express their highest selves.
Now, they didn't. I mean, we do have a lot more choice, an amazing amount of choice. That part was true, but much of it, the rest of it hasn't played out the way you thought. But it is clearly not your view that you were just naive about human nature, right? That we're just worse than you thought, and that's what's happening.
No, if I was naive about anything, it was about the power of capitalism. I really didn't know that capitalism was the operating system on which everything runs. You know, it's the whole Megillah. And that these young programmers who were talking about disruption and new beginnings and doing things differently, they didn't. As soon as anyone had an idea, they went to Goldman Sachs with the idea and said, what do I do with this? And they said, here, take this money and then pivot to something much more extractive than your original business plan. And so we got a bunch of college dropouts who don't read history, don't read anthropology, don't read sociology, don't know ethics. They know some programming. And when they're 19 years old, before they even have a fully developed brain, they're building the platforms on which we are running our society.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not as sure as you are that capitalism is the problem. And so maybe I'll give you some pushback on that front. But there is a weird thing about this world because of these network effects. A given thing can just take off, like Facebook, just take off and acquire near monopoly power, or like Twitter. Like if you're a journalist like me, there's no alternative to Twitter in terms of like where to go and communicate with your peers. It's in effect a monopoly. And so these businesses, there's this kind of random element where whoever happens to be the founder of the network that takes off is like the person you got to live with and whose values you've got to live with. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, let's face it, if you just observed him at Harvard as a student, that would not inspire confidence, right? I mean, I can name a couple of things that are well known in his career at Harvard that, were not exactly like Eagle Scout behavior. But here we are. To what extent is it capitalism, and to what extent, I know your answer, I think, but to what extent is it just that the people that wound up happening to be in charge of particular monopolies?
Well, I mean, I guess it's capitalism is what, or a certain kind of capitalism is what allows those people to shoot up like that. So I guess, ultimately it's both. I do think that capitalism can be used by humans. I don't think it has to be capitalism using humans. It's just, the old sort of Adam Smith view of capitalism, that as long as you've got land, labor, and capital all represented together as the factors of production, things are going to work out. So what do the Uber drivers have to say about Uber? What do the towns in which Uber is operating have to say about Uber? If you get a conversation between all three as stakeholders, then Uber doesn't have to be this Travis Kalanick's nightmare on how you operate and monopolize a market.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, do you think Facebook could be, well, maybe you should elaborate a little on what you don't like about Facebook, just as one example. There are other such companies well about. To what extent do you think what you don't like is a reflection of like Zuckerberg, and is it inevitable? To what extent is it just what happens when you got something that goes to the stock market and is a big part of the capitalist machine.
I mean, it is. I don't blame Zuckerberg as much as I blame maybe Sheryl Sandberg. The need for the company to show 100x or 1000x returns. I mean, I think Mark Zuckerberg could have stopped. He couldn't, but he could have stopped as a low-level billionaire, a $1, $2, $3 billion dude, and probably not have surrendered the platform to the kind of algorithmic malfeasance that's going on there right now. If it had just been there and there's Facebook, you can connect with people, and in return for publishing your consumer profile and looking at ads, you get to connect with all these people for free. And that's basically the same way direct marketing has always worked. I didn't love it, but whatever, it's there. New York Times has advertising in it too. But that wasn't enough. They had to then, how do we grow another 100 times? And that's by starting to do other things, by surrendering the platform. That's why when, my friends are some of the people who started Twitter. And when I saw their faces on the cover of the Wall Street Journal with the number $4.3 billion under Evan Williams' face, it's how much he made the morning of the IPO, I thought, this guy's screwed. How is he going to show 100x return on that with a 140-character messaging app? It's impossible.
Right. No, the growth imperative does seem to often push things beyond a point where I think they're kind of fine and good. And Twitter's a good example. I mean, it was this bare bones thing where you totally controlled what was in your feed in a very easy and straightforward way. And now stuff shows up in my feed, and I can't even figure out how to tell Twitter I do not want to see things just because my friends like them. I don't, and I certainly don't want to see things that people I never heard of. Anyway. But so how would Facebook be different? If in your world, what wouldn't be there? I mean, it seems to me a certain amount of Facebook. I mean, I grant you that they're fine tuning their algorithms to keep people addicted and to keep people sharing and liking and so on. But like in your ideal world, would there be sharing and liking, or what? Tell us what Facebook would be like in your dream world.
Well, I think it would be exactly what it is, except you would actually get what you want, and you would speak to who has subscribed to you. It would be, that's what you would see is what did I, but what Facebook does is it curates from what you've asked for. It curates and delivers to you the stuff that's going to provoke the greatest reaction. So Facebook's algorithms, not Facebook's psychologists, Facebook's algorithms found out that people are extremely likely to click on a picture of their ex having fun.
Which is not what I would recommend if I were their therapist.
Right. But so what they will do is find if you have an ex, even if you're no longer following them, if there's a picture of the ex having fun, and they can figure out if they're having fun by the responses that the photo gets, even if they can't do machine learning on the photo itself, they will throw that into your feed and they will get your engagement. And then they'll say, well, you engaged with it, so it's what you want.
Right. So it's basically like you say to Facebook, okay, here's all the people whose stuff I want to see. And what Facebook does is say, we're going to show you the subset of all that stuff that's going to make you feel either very good or very bad, right?
And a few extra things that either someone may have paid for or that we think will provoke engagement.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about this idea? And if you want to take this and make it a core part of Team Human's agenda, feel free, assuming you haven't heard it already. I am in favor of algorithmic transparency. I would even be happy to see a law. Facebook, I mean, two things. Facebook has to tell us what exactly is the nature of the algorithm that is the default algorithm. Then the other thing I'd like to see is we get to fiddle with the control knobs. Now that's not always easy to do. Algorithms are complicated. It's, you'd have to it would take some craft to turn their basic dimensions into sliders where you can slide it left or right. But that would be a much better world. The transparency part, I'd be totally happy to see a law.
It's exactly. And that's not rocket science. That's pretty easy. But, and it's not just, so Facebook has algorithms that use our past behaviors to figure out what statistical buckets to put us in, and then to try to encourage us to remain true to our statistical profile. Because they want to increase, right now they're at about 80% accuracy. They want to get that up to 90. And the way they do that is by taking the 20% of people who are going to do some unexpected behavior and get them to fall in line with what's predicted, which is really terrific for promoting innovation and novel solutions. But that aside, it's manipulative, and we don't know how and when they're doing it. On top of that, and you can read in, Algorithms of Oppression and other books, judges are using algorithms that help them decide how long the sentences should be for convicts or for convicted felons. And they don't get to see what's in those algorithms either. They're proprietary. That's a terrible, and I wonder, I guess a true libertarian would say it all has to be open, that you can't even have a regulation that allows you to keep it secret, maybe. But it's those proprietary secrets that create the black boxes that put that play in the steering wheel. Back in the day, again, the earlier day, it was so easy to know what the computers were doing because they only did what you saw. Mm-hmm. They followed your command line. Get me this, and now if you do a Google search and I do a Google search, we're going to get completely different results based on our histories, and we don't even understand how they calculated what to give you and what to give me. I totally agree. Transparency would solve almost the whole thing, because then people could decide, do I want to be on a social network that has that algorithm, or do I want to be on one that has this algorithm?
Well, there would still be the problem generated by the network effects, which is that it's hard to find a rival platform because somebody tries to start one and it's got like 3% of your friends are on it, and so you don't jump. I mean, people have tried, but this is at the same time, to my mind, it's the argument for regulation. These are natural monopolies, and once they're monopolies, they are just clearly, Facebook would be much less, I think, abusive. When you look at some of the things they've tried, just trotted out there and then had to apologize for, like way back in the day, Beacon, where suddenly they started telling your friends what you've been purchasing, right? Like they would be much less inclined to just try stuff like that and throw it out there if they faced actual competition. But in the real world, they don't. And to my mind, that's an argument for regulation. Monopoly is always an argument for regulation.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if monopolies got regulated regularly, then companies may be more reluctant to get to that level. They may actually want to be free to do what they do, and then you'd end up with a healthier competitive ecosystem.
Yeah. But I'd love to see government-mandated transparency. I just get to see the algorithm governing my life since I don't really have the realistic choice of choosing another platform. What now? I guess another reply would be, if I were Mark Zuckerberg, is like, probably if you tell me what kind of interaction you'd like to see on Facebook, I'd say, that's available to people. People can, for example, they can do email groups, just a group of friends chat. It happens. Probably every form of conversation you'd like to see on Facebook, there's a way to make it happen. But people are choosing Facebook, right? So
there's ways to do terrific things on Facebook. And particularly if you look in developing countries where Facebook is their primary access to the internet, some of them just call the internet Facebook. That's their word for the internet, because that's how they get on. And they're doing great things, and they're doing even, blockchain cryptocurrency transactions through Facebook Instant Messenger and really orchestrating their lives and microloans and all sorts of things in totally positive ways. It's just, does Facebook need to be an extension of surveillance capitalism? Or, can it be selling us the service rather than extracting this much data and leveraging this much, psychological and social control over people?
Mm-hmm. Now, when you chose to call your book Team Human, and you have a Team Human podcast too, right? Mm-hmm. In which you presumably try to recruit people to Team Human?
To the human race, exactly.
Human race. Well, actually, I already consider myself a member of that, but... Yay! So the idea, I gather, is that, I mean, is the idea like the humans versus the machines, or the humans who resist their commodification by capitalism, or what's the core idea behind declaring that, damn it, you're a human?
I mean, two things. One is just that I believe that being human is a team sport, and that we've kind of succumbed to this strident individualism of these platforms, and we're not going to make it if we do that. And I'm trying to sort of restore a bit of rapport and solidarity between people and communities, so they share and want to be with each other rather than, in Fortnite or whatever feels safer to them. But the actual phrase came up because I was debating a transhumanist on a panel. It was actually on CNN. They cut this part, but the guy was saying about how the singularity is coming, and computers will be smarter than people, and people should accept their extinction. That technology and computers are our evolutionary successor, and the minute that they're actually smarter than us, we should pass the evolutionary torch to them, recede into the background, and after the computers don't need us to keep the lights on anymore, accept that we were temporary. And I said, no, but human beings are special.
But he doesn't mean we'd die, right? He just means we'd play video games and take drugs or something.
No, and go. That the planet and go.
We don't even get the like pods in the Matrix. We don't get anything.
No, we can upload consciousness to them, but they're our successor. If we're going to survive and keep going, it's.
I think we should get the pods. That's my minimal demand.
Minimum, we get a pod and
pleasant dream into my brain. I'm not going quietly if they don't give me that.
But and I argued that human beings are special. We deserve a place in the future, and we should be designing, technology not just to promote information's ascent, above the chrysalis of matter, but to create a better future for humans. And he said, "Oh, Rushkoff, you're just saying that because you're a human," as if it was hubris for me to be arguing for it. And I said, "Okay, I'm guilty as charged. I'm on Team Human." Okay. And that was when I kind of came up with it. And it wasn't Team Human against Team Algorithm as much as Team Humans for our own sake. And it's okay for us to argue for our own our own sustainability.
Okay. And so, what kinds of things do people on Team Human do to in keeping with the spirit of the team?
I guess they. Well, gosh, I mean, as many things as humans do. I would think what they do is look for, when they develop a technology, they think about, is this a technology that's going to play humans, or is this a technology for humans to use? So right now, the emphasis of the internet is, how can we use technology to control or modify or change human behavior? And I'm looking to thinking, how can we use it to express a human agenda? It's people who don't see human beings as the problem and technology as the solution, but see human beings as a solution. And technology is not as a problem, but as a way of expressing and enhancing our humanity. I think it's kind of, I mean, there's a lot of ways to be a human, but it's people who kind of, I would think, celebrate what's uniquely human about humans. Our ability to embrace ambiguity and paradox, our ability to experience compassion for others, our unique position as truly conscious, self-aware life forms, that we could make nature less cruel rather than more cruel. Those sorts of things, but mostly the willingness to just reach out and be with other people, which is increasingly difficult. That every year I teach in the university, and every year there's more kids on the first day who come with a note from their doctor saying that they should be excused from doing class presentations or contributing during seminars because they have the social anxiety. And people on Team Human, I think, want to restore those old school evolved social mechanisms for establishing rapport.
Yeah. Now, I mean, there's no shortage, certainly, of ways to connect with all kinds of people in the digital world. And yet, as has now been much discussed, what you often see in the digital world is people connecting in a hostile way. You know, this is the famous so-called problem of tribalism, polarization, whatever. What's your take on that? Is that I clearly you don't think this is an inherent effect of technology. I guess it didn't have to be that way, but something about something in the environment, maybe including technology, is making it play out that way at the moment, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think that the television media environment was very much about globalism because we had these giant simultaneous satellite experiences of the Olympics or the moon landing, you know, and I feel like the television era kind of peaked with Ronald Reagan at the Brandenburg Gate saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," you know, and there was good and bad about it. It was, you know, I was at the WTO protests. We were also upset about globalism and global markets and global corporations and the demise of the nation state and localism. And, you know, so there was problems with neoliberalism and whatever, but it was global. The internet, I thought, was going to be an extension of that global energy, and it wasn't. The internet is very discrete. Everything is, are you here? Are you there? Is it 1? Is it 0? Is it yes? Is it no? And the internet has really fostered this discrete, boundaried understanding of our world. So instead of tear down this wall, we've got Trump building a wall as if we need to reestablish there's us, there's them, there's here, there's there.
Well, it does often connect people across great geographic distances, right? In fact, I mean, part of the grievance of some Trump supporters, at least it's said to be, a reaction against the fact that affluent people feel more connected to other affluent people in the rest of the world than they do to less affluent Americans. And by the same token, you know, Steve Bannon is out there organizing internationally, and I don't doubt that he'll have success. So, I mean, there is a kind of extension. There is a kind of social extension. It's just that it's an extension, a long distance extension within tribal lines, and the tribes are fighting each other, right?
Right. And that whole, you know, red state, blue state thing that, I mean, I don't know whether to blame television or computers or what for that picture of America as one or the other, as either or, was, it's such a disturbing notion. But yeah. And, you know, and the other bias of digital technology is memory. You know, the whole thing, it's all happening on memory. And you get a friend from second grade who you spent 50 years getting away from now shows up, you know, in perfect clarity, wanting to be your friend on Facebook or on Twitter. You know, there used to be, they would kind of recede into the background. They get blurry, and now they show up.
But some of that's good, right?
Some of it's great. Yeah. Some of it's great, but it's disorienting. It's like, that's why we end up with memory. Make America great again. Or remember when Britain was apart from Europe. Let's, you know, pull out and make Hail Britannia, you know. And it's like, these are false memories. They're not, we're hearkening back to times that weren't what they think. I mean, the Make America Great Again period of time they're thinking about is probably the New Deal or something. You know, that's the time they're looking at. It's like, no, it's the opposite of the politics that you're talking about. So it's kind of interesting.
So we talked a little about AI and the chances of you know, and whether humans should gracefully recede into the background. I assume you acknowledge that something, I mean, maybe you don't. Maybe you're an AI skeptic. You are an AI skeptic, actually. You're something of an AI skeptic, right? You think its progress is greatly overrated. Because I look around and I mean, like, I say, hey, Google, what time's the next train leave? And tells me, and I'm like, whoa. You know, but you're kind of an AI skeptic, right?
Yeah, well, at least AI, we're thinking about it. You know, there's all these science fiction sort of movies where the robots become conscious and then have a revolution or fight back against us, and they're angry that we turn them into slaves. And I think that has a whole lot more to do with America's sort of unresolved slavery guilt than it does with some future robot revolution against us. You know, AIs, I'm not afraid for AIs to consciously inflict their will on humanity. I am more concerned about what is it that we're going to program AIs to do, and will they be successful at doing it? So if a company says, AI, figure out how to get these people's money by any means necessary, I don't like what those mean, what those means might be. So, I mean, I'm not so scared of AI as I am what it is that we want to invest in them.
Mm-hmm. Now, you are a Gaia hypothesis. You're a Gaia enthusiast. I mean, again, for our younger viewers, I mean, Gaia. You still hear the word, but there was an uptick of enthusiasm for this idea that the Earth is like an organism, and the ecosystem. It's all there's the lungs, and there's the and one manifestation of that idea involves the kind of Teilhard de Chardin idea that what is if we're evolving toward a kind of giant global brain, so it'll be more and more like an organism. To some extent, we are seeing the machinery of that set up, right? I mean, so long as people can't get along, presumably it won't be a truly global brain. But what is your current take on that part of what I think was, at least at one point, your enthusiasm?
I guess my current take on it, and even back then I was arguing that the internet was not going to be the actual hardwiring of the global brain, but the internet was almost like a way to practice that sort of enhanced connectivity, or to see ourselves. It's like training wheels, and I mean, I look at some indigenous cultures, and they seem to have that more organismic understanding, but not at scale, the way a global civilization might want to do it. I'm still thinking it's possible and perhaps even necessary not to create the super organism fascist sort of, whatever that Uber thing is, but to be able to behave in a coordinated fashion to, promote the integrity of our species over time. Whether I just did an event with Naomi Klein last night, who was talking about the Green New Deal, as a sort of a global thing. And I was listening and I was thinking, I think it's much more subtle than people think. It's not like that, oh, now I feel the whole the whole planet and we're steering left and steering. It's not like that, but a more subtle understanding that, in some ways being a global citizen means not trying to do everything at scale. I don't need 100,000 Twitter followers. I'm satisfied just being in a classroom and teaching these 40 people at a time. And it's so hard for people to kind of scale down that in some ways being part of the biggest thing means having a conservative approach to one's kind of global footprint as opposed to a global one.
Where do you teach, by the way?
I teach at CUNY, City University of New York. It was sort of the way I could justify not isolating in some ivory tower and being all divided. But I really started teaching not for the money so much as I'm in my 50s now, and it's kind of time to pay back, to teach the next generation rather than just, run around.
Now, do you have any real hope that things are going to change in the sense that there's going to be some alternative to the capitalist model? I mean, if capitalism is the problem, you're up against something pretty formidable, right? I mean, A, do you think that the only hope is to kind of escape capitalism somehow? And B, do you think there's a way to actually do that? And what would it look like?
I don't think we have to get rid of capitalism entirely. I think that capitalism doesn't have to be the one-size-fits-all solution to all of our commerce. Capitalism arose with the monarchy, with central currency, and it was the Renaissance birthed capitalism. It was, and with every, this is sort of Alvin Toffler stuff, but with every new major era, you get a new form of government and a new form of commerce. And we got capitalism for the industrial age. And I feel like the digital age may require an alternative model. Not that it wipes out capitalism, but it's funny for how much everybody talks about disruption. nobody's really disrupting anything. They're doing the same old thing. Amazon did what Walmart did, just a lot faster and more completely, but it's the same old model. And it creates these monopolies that don't really, that get top heavy and don't really function in everyone's best interest. So, I'm not there yet, and I don't know if blockchain's going to do it or whatever, but
do you even understand how it's supposed to save the world? I still don't.
Blockchain?
Yeah.
I understand why it's supposed to save the world, but not how. I understand the idea of a distributed ledger and you don't need central authorities, but
yeah, I get that part. But
yeah, but what we need, a better ledger? I don't think it's a better, I don't think it's that.
Okay. So would your like your ideal social medium, would it be a social network? Would it be like Twitter was at one point, where it's just totally straightforward? If I want to hear what they have to say, I follow them. I only see what they retweet, and that way they will know that to retweet is to share with their followers. Like is something else. Totally straightforward. No algorithmic involvement. I see exactly what I want to see. And then maybe I guess you could get little doodads.
I love this idea of slidered algorithms. Where it's like, you could put them all to 0, and I'm just going to get the stuff I subscribe to.
Exactly.
Or it could be emphasize a little bit more of this, filter out more of this. I don't want to hear the curse words. Right. Less news today, no news. And you just put that slider all the way off. So
like with this person, I want to see only their stuff that's the 50% of their stuff that's most retweeted or most liked, if you want to do that.
Right.
Whatever. I mean, why not? The other thing is, why aren't third parties doing this? I mean, I guess Twitter and Facebook do not offer an API or whatever the term is in their case that allows people to do that. There should be a law. That's the thing. The law shouldn't be that Facebook has to provide the sliders. It should be that they need to be transparent about the algorithm and offer third-party companies the ability to do custom sliders. I can subscribe to the custom slider company of my choice, right?
Right. So then basically you're saying that once a company reaches monopoly status, if they do, they have to have an open API.
Yeah. And let us choose what form, how we want to set our own damn algorithm. I mean, this is just so obvious, right?
It seems obvious to me too. But that's a big fight. That's a big fight.
Of course, because you are up against a company but I will say that more than ever now, the time is right for a politician who wants to run with it, because there is so much disenchantment with some of these companies.
Yeah.
So before we go, tell us, so what is your life like? You're presumably out there trying to resist the nefarious tides you perceive. So what? Like you walk out and you have this organic garden, and you put some, compost on your tomatoes, or what? What is your life like?
Oh, I live a normal life. I'm just in the suburbs doing what I can, getting my kid to walk to school and, making what incremental changes I can to be a better, steward of the world or whatever. But, like most people, I, talk the talk better than I walk the walk. It's hard, I mean, I decided to take, it's like 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I decided to take a job at CUNY because I wanted to teach real kids and first generation Americans, and not get stuck in an elitist ivory tower, and actually pay back to society. At the same time, because Queens College is poor, there's no mass transit to Queens College. If I want to get there on mass transit, I've got to do a train, 2 subways, and 2 buses. 2.5 hours to get there, 2.5 to get home. So I drive. So now I'm driving to Queens College. Now I got to look, okay, do I get a Volt, a Chevy Volt, which is an electric car? But then I look at the carbon footprint of the Chevy Volt end to end, and it's like, oh, there's this big lithium battery that's going to end up in the ground. You got slavery to get it out. So, all right, so no, now I'm going to drive a car. But now I drive a car with the highest gas mileage, and it's like, oh, but that one uses Chinese slave labor for the parts. So I start looking around. Well, what car doesn't use Chinese slave labor? BMW. It's all German labor and Japanese parts.
Well, at one point, you could look at it like it's not literally slave labor, and the Chinese workers apparently would rather do that work than the alternative, right?
Some of them, yeah.
I mean,
it depends. Yeah. I mean, it's tricky.
I'm just trying to help you be able to buy a vehicle. I'm just doing what I can. Maybe that
but you know what I mean. I'm just saying that it's hard that there's some systemic issues that prevent a person from raising a family, and I'm not going to go move to Vermont and build a place with solar panels and all. That's going to use more energy than just sitting where I am and trying to make incremental adjustments. There's not enough land for us all to get, a solar farm.
That is true. So, well, listen, tell us where we can find your stuff. Okay, there's the book, Team Human. There's the podcast, Team Human. You got a website. It's probably what? There's the book. It looks like that. Is your website DouglasRushkoff.com?
Yeah, well, it's actually Rushkoff.com, but you can get to it with DouglasRushkoff. I bought that because someone in China bought that. They bought my name and then told me, yeah, you can have your name back for $500.
Well, it's probably some slave trying to get enough money to buy his way out of slavery.
Right.
But
yeah, Rushkoff.com, or I've got a podcast called Team Human that you can find on all the podcasting services and stuff.
Are you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter.
What is your Twitter handle?
Rushkoff.
Not coincidentally, and mine is, by the way, is Robert Writer, WRIGHTER.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, isn't that clever? I came up with it myself. And are you have like a Facebook presence?
No, Facebook years ago. I just found it too cumbersome.
Yeah.
There is a Rushkoff fan page that they put stuff up there, but I didn't want. It felt like if I was on Facebook as me, then I'm basically asking people to follow me if I'm there. And if I'm asking people to follow me on Facebook or to like me on Facebook, I'm making them vulnerable to stuff that they might not realize.
Right. Because Facebook does have a much more obscure and probably insidious algorithm than Twitter. Twitter's algorithm is still in the early stages of evolving toward evil, I would say.
Yeah. And hopefully they can push back. But if they've got to earn the money, I mean, that's why there was that great buy Twitter movement. We'd get the users to buy Twitter so that we could keep it doing the things we like it doing.
Yeah. I'd love it. Just keep it plain vanilla and give us the damn sliders.
I know. I love vanilla. That should have been the title of my book, Vanilla.
Or sliders. Either way. So, hey, thanks for taking the time. Good luck with the book.
Thank you. Thanks so much for doing this and getting me in front of your people. It means a lot.
My pleasure. A lot of fun. Take care.
Okay, you be good. Okay. Bye-bye.